Qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix is over, and it is not McLaren or Max Verstappen on pole position, as George Russell in the Mercedes manages to take pole around the Marina Bay Circuit. But what did we learn? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the data and doing a data analysis from qualifying. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But before I get into the video, when you've finished checking out this video, please check out Crash Happy, which you can find in the description below. It is an F1-ish podcast with myself, Mr. V, Not Applicable, Formula Duck, and Dan No Skill. But now, let's get into the video, and well, we're going to be talking about the top teams later on, so please do stick around for that. Yep, qualifying is over at Singapore, and after multiple incidents in practice with Liam Lawson in the wall twice, and also George Russell in the wall, qualifying was actually pretty clean, all things considered. The only real incident was Gasly, but that was not even a crash. It looked to be more like a hydraulic failure. But even so, we saw a few drivers getting very close to the wall. Both Charles Leclerc and George Russell gave the wall some pretty big kisses, but both drivers managed to survive the hits. Overall, from last season to this season, George Russell's lap time was 0.4 of a second faster than Lando Norris's pole time from 2024. But where were the differences? Well, let's compare the 2024 and 2025 pole position lap times to see where those differences are. And when you take a look at these two pole laps from year to year, it's actually pretty interesting. Going into turn 1, it looks like Russell was able to brake a lot later compared to Norris last year, which could be down to these cars becoming more efficient and the brakes compared to last season. Which is, well, just down to them getting more efficient as they understand the cars more and more. Also, at turns 2 and 3, you can see Russell carries about 9 km per hour more speed, as the resurfaced track seems to be giving Russell some much needed grip in that area. And when they reach the end of Raffles Boulevard at turn 7, you can see again Russell is able to brake a lot later than Norris was in 2024. The same is also at turn 10. When they reach the end of the Anderson Bridge at turn 13, Norris in 2024 actually does manage to get a better run and uses that to his advantage on the run down to turn 14. But overall, the gap between the two laps was 0.367 seconds in the advantage of George Russell. And when you look at these two laps, it looks like the resurfacing has helped Russell to find more grip in a few of the corners. And also with the general evolution of these cars, you can see that Russell was a lot later on the brakes compared to Norris, which I think could show really why overtaking in F1 in 2025 is a lot more difficult compared to, say, 2024. These cars are now reaching the limit of their performances, and the efficiency is so good that they're getting later and later on the brakes, meaning that the braking zones are getting shorter and shorter. And because of this, well, you can't really overtake when the braking zones are so short. But overall, the lap time difference was, like I said, 3.5 tenths in the favour of George Russell. So we've seen how the lap times compared from last season to this season, but now let's take a look at the top speeds to see what we can learn in terms of downforce and who is looking fast or slow in a straight line. And when it comes to straight line performance, you can see just how much slower the cars are in a straight line here compared to, say, Baku or Monza. But it was Alpine who were the fastest cars in a straight line as they hit 317 km per hour. Given that the Renault in general has less power than the rest of the competition, it's probably fair to say that Alpine were either getting a tow or they are running with less downforce than the competition to try and get themselves in the mix when it comes to on-track overtaking. Mercedes were also fast in a straight line as George Russell reached 316 km per hour. Ferrari, though, it looks like we're one of the slowest in a straight line, which could mean that they're running with even more downforce than the rest of the competition, and it also means that they may find overtaking pretty difficult in the Grand Prix, which, you know, doesn't really help given they are in general the 4th fastest cars now, and all the cars ahead of them in general are faster than them now. So, I just want to say if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get back to the video and let's talk about Red Bull. For Red Bull then, it was very much a tale of two halves this session. Once again, Max Verstappen magic strikes as he lines up in P2 on the grid and potentially could have had pole position if not for getting some dirty air by Lando Norris. But teammate Tsunoda had a bit of a shocker and finds himself all the way down the order in P15, which is frankly not acceptable. In Q2, Verstappen was 8/10 faster than Tsunoda. To understand why there's such a big gap between them, let's look at the Q2 laps of Verstappen and Tsunoda. I will be comparing Max and Russell when I talk about Mercedes a little bit later on, so of course please do stick around for that. And when you take a look at these two laps from Q2, it's clear where Max is just more comfortable. At turn 1, 5 and 10, Verstappen carries a lot more minimum apex speed compared to Yuki Tsunoda. Max is just able to get the car rotated around the corners while carrying the speed a lot better than Tsunoda. And Max still manages to find time. I have a feeling if Tsunoda tried to match the speed that Verstappen was carrying, Tsunoda would probably go wrong somewhere and he would have a snap of oversteer. Just look at turn 10 for example. Verstappen here was over 0.2 of a second faster than Yuki Tsunoda. For Max in the Grand Prix, a race win is very possible, but it will probably come down to his start against his best friend George Russell. If Max does get the lead and does win, then maybe a 5th world title could be possible, because it just helps him to close the gap just a little bit more to both Piastri and Lando Norris. For Ferrari then, it was where they were probably always going to finish. It feels like Ferrari has now dropped back to being the 4th fastest car overall, and they can't seem to be able to do anything about the cars ahead of them. Lewis Hamilton beat Charles Leclerc in qualifying in the final lap, but when it came to that final lap, Leclerc was actually on for beating Hamilton, but he made a mistake in the final couple of corners, which ultimately cost him position. And because of that error, it was not his fastest lap. So, let's compare the fastest laps of Lewis Hamilton to Charles Leclerc to see where the differences were. And when you take a look at these two laps, it's actually advantage Charles Leclerc in the first sector. However, I think this essentially backfired on Leclerc, because Hamilton sets up a better exit for the run down Ruffles Boulevard, and well, Hamilton does get a better exit and use that to his advantage all the way down Ruffles Boulevard. Hamilton also gets a better exit from turn 9. Going through the final couple of corners though, look at Charles Leclerc. Charles gets a fantastic run, but he was not good enough in the middle portion of the lap, and ultimately for Ferrari, it was the maximum that they could do, and the maximum that they can do is just not good enough. For Mercedes then, it was another brilliant qualifying session for George Russell, as Russell takes pole position and really takes it pretty easily, as both of his laps were good enough for pole position, and teammate Kimi Antonelli was good enough to beat one of the McLaren cars, as Antonelli beat Lando Norris. But now, let's compare the fastest laps of George Russell to Max Verstappen to see how Russell took pole. When you look at these two laps, it looks like the Mercedes was faster in a straight line, which would make sense based on what we saw earlier when we were looking at the top speed. You can see that on the run down to Raffles Boulevard, Russell was the faster car in a straight line. But not only that, Russell also gets fantastic traction and a great run at all of the 90-degree corner sections, and this is where the damage is really done. By turn 14, Russell is 0.4 of a second up on Max Verstappen, but when it comes to those last couple of corners, Verstappen, as ever, carries fantastic speed to close the gap, but it was not enough, and in the end, Russell takes pole position by almost 0.2 of a second. In the Grand Prix itself for Mercedes, they could be in a great place to potentially try and score their second win of the season, if Russell can nail the start and control the race. Finally then for McLaren, it was another session where it seems like they have fallen away a little bit, as Oscar Piastri was P3 and Lando Norris was down in P5. And honestly, for Lando, this is not great for his championship hopes, as he has again given himself a lot of work to do. But when you compare the laps of both drivers, it was actually very, very close between them, and to be honest, it was advantage Norris for most of the lap. Norris, especially in Sector 2, was a lot faster than teammate Oscar Piastri, but through the final corner, Piastri launches the McLaren into the corner and carries around 6 km/h more speed, and uses that to his advantage through the final corner and on that short run to the line. It doesn't sound like much, but when the gaps are so close, these minor differences are what is going to either cost or help Lando Norris if he wants to close down the gap to Oscar Piastri to try and win the World Championship. In the Grand Prix, McLaren will be looking to come through and get both cars on the podium, but this circuit is a very difficult circuit when it comes to overtaking, and McLaren are not generally the fastest cars in a straight line, so they do have some work to do. So with that in mind then, what are my final predictions for the top 5 in the Singapore Grand Prix? Well, in P5 I'm going to go for Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. I don't really think I've said Lewis Hamilton in the top 5 much this season, but I'm going to go with him to finish in P5. P4 will be Lando Norris in the McLaren. P3 will be Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P2 will be George Russell in the Mercedes. And I'm going to go for Max Verstappen to make it 3 wins in a row and hopefully give us some hope for an interesting battle in the Drivers' Championship. But those are my thoughts. The question is, what do you guys think will happen? In the comment section down below, please do let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.